Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Thunderstock Show. Our goal is to have some valuable brainstorms to enhance your life, liberty, and pursuit of property. My special guest today is Fred Joyal. Fred is from the wonderful state of Rhode Island. He has quite a few stories, but we're going to be talking about how to become super bold. He's written some books on boldness and confidence. He's also had a long tenure as a successful CEO. We'll get into that story as well. And some run-ins with some pop culture figures with some morals and lessons learned there. Fred, super stoked to have you on. Thanks for joining the show.
Ross, great to be here. Looking forward to diving in.
So I have to ask, have you always been super bold, or is that something that you've developed over time? Were you born with it, or is it a skill you had to hone?
No, the reason I write about it is I grew up as a painful introvert. I missed all sorts of opportunities, fun dates, adventure, and even opportunities to step up and be kind and help people. And it really frustrated me and eventually angered me. And I just thought I have to find a way out of this. And I did. And it changed my life. And it changed my mindset about boldness to understand that it's actually learnable. It's a developable skill rather than what most people think, which is it's a personality trait. It's not a DNA thing.
The quote, "Fortune favors the bold." I have to bring that quote up. Why is that quote? First of all, what do you think about it? And I want to hear why you think the way you think about it. Fortune favors the bold.
Yeah, that it does, because the amazing thing is when you behave in a bold way, when you take bold action, whether you know how it's going to go or not, because that's the reality is in all risk, the definition of risk is you don't know how it's going to go for sure. If you're sure, then you're confident. It's nothing. There's nothing risky about it. So, but what happens when you are bold is unexpectedly positive things show up. It's almost like the universe says, "Oh, you're ready to play. You're stepping up. I got some surprises for you." And they're almost always better. Sometimes what you're going for, you don't get, but you get something different that actually is better. So what happens as you take more bold action is you start to expect the unexpected.
So you said growing up you're painfully introverted. Was there a specific moment or event that happened where you were faced with, I've gotta step up my extroversion, I've got to be more out there, take bigger risks, be bold? Or was it something that was gradual over time? How did that switch flip?
It was a lot of regrets accumulating, and then there were some ones that really stung. And I said, this can't continue. And one of them was, didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, so I did all these odd jobs. And I was working in a machine shop just as a shop floor hand in my 20s. And the owner came up to me at one point and he said, "You seem like a really smart guy. I think you could sell for us. So come up to the office tomorrow and we'll get you started." I went, okay. And so I go to the office. The sales manager says, "Here's your desk, here's a phone, and here's a list of businesses in the state. Start calling them and see if they want to do business with them." I couldn't make a single phone call. I mean, I had call reluctance. Like, I read the list over and over again. I reached for the phone several dozen times, picked it up a couple of times, never dialed it because I didn't know what to say. And I wasn't so like, oh, what if they hang up on me? What if they curse me out? What if they yell at me or something, or I get tongue tied? All of those things just kept me from acting. And, next day back on the shop floor, working as an assistant. And it pained me that I was incapable like that I would. But the thing that stung the most is this is the first man in my life that ever really believed in me and expressed that. And I let him down. And man, that hurt. That was like, this cannot continue. So that was one of the pivotal moments where I said, I have to figure out a way out of this. Now, there's a whole bunch of reasons I didn't succeed, like no training would be one example. But
Sure.
at the time, that was very powerful.
You talk about the motivation of pain. And I've had plenty of conversations and talk with plenty of people, and often whether it's public facing or PR, the very PR friendly rosy outcome is follow your passion, but whatever you love to do, follow that and it'll all work out. That's works for some people and that's great. But for many people, it's you can deal with the pain of regret or the pain of failure. The pain of failure, as long as you don't quit, is typically always temporary. The pain of regret is when I think you either don't seize the moment, carpe diem, or you give up too soon. And that one's a bit harder to come back from. So, what did that initial failure, how did you react to that? Because we're going to, we're just getting started in the beginning of this journey, but spoiler alert for everyone listening, there's a lot of success that comes on the tail end of this.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Is follow your passion is a great way to go broke as advice too. Somebody better be interested in paying for that. Otherwise, and which doesn't mean you don't follow it, but you might need a job too. I mean, your
Hmm.
passion may be to be in a rock and roll band. Guess what? You're not going to, or to act. I spent 40 years living in Los Angeles. I knew more actor, waitress, bartenders than I knew successful actors because like 97% unemployment in acting. They're following their passion.
97%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think it's getting worse. Once AI starts making stuff, there won't be any extra work. There'll be a lot of roles that'll just be generated.
Like the green screen effect, but
Yeah,
more.
but made worse because now they can create the character itself.
Hmm.
But there's this whole idea that you can have a passion, but it has to monetize, or you have to find a support system. A lot of people can't come up with their passion because they're over defining it as like, I
Mm.
have to have significant impact on thousands of people. Guess what? Your passion may be a great dad. Okay.
Right.
Be a great personal assistant, like that. I'm helping this person's career. I'm making it easy for her to succeed because I know what she needs, and I keep people off of her that are going to waste her time, and on and on. And that can be incredibly satisfying to do that. So redefine your passion as what's the impact that really matters to you. And it may just be, I want to be the best friend anybody's ever had. Well, that's a wonderful passion. I want you as a friend at that point. So, and that's the thing about boldness. It's not about becoming a world beater, and in front of 10,000 people and becoming president and stuff like that. Maybe you want to be on the town council in your local town because you love your town and you want to help, but you want to be the best council member that they've ever had. So
And to that
redefine.
point, redefining your passion. I think if you ask your 8-year-old self, what's your passion? It may be a lot different than your answer today. And that's okay. I think we're not trees. We are not rooted to one location or one way of thinking. We're meant to evolve and change our perspective. But I'll tell you a quick anecdote. I had a passion for sports and martial arts growing up. I was a college wrestler, and then I got into mixed martial arts world around the time that Conor McGregor became famous. So it's starting to become popular and more acceptable. And I said, you know what? I'm going to burn the boats. I'm going to save some money from working my corporate job. I'm going to go all in and be an MMA fighter. And as soon as I did that, I had my first loss. And I just fell out of love. I was like, this is now a job and no longer fun. And I'm not going to make money. It's sort of like that 97% unemployment for acting. And I would consider it a complete failure. But as I got older, I will look back and I'm like, I'm so glad I did it because now it's out of my system. That failure was a necessary condition to have full confidence in the next decision, the next passion, the next choice. So I want to go back to your career because you had quite a run with your business ventures. What was your first business and how did that go? Because typically entrepreneurs, their first one ever is not their last one ever.
So I had like a painting contracting business to pay my way through college and when I was in my gap half decade and stuff. But once I discovered advertising, that was when I said, I found my tribe. I found something I could do. And so I loved advertising, but I quickly learned I didn't like the career arc because you fall off a cliff at 50. You
Mm,
know, you go from making 2, 3, 400 grand a year to you can't get a job when they lay you off.
mhm.
And I was seeing it happen in my agency. I was in a big LA agency. And it just coincidentally, a guy I knew had the phone number 800 dentist, and he had it ring into his house, hooked it up. And he saw me succeeding in advertising. He said, I think you could create a business out of this. And so I had another close friend who was wanting to quit his job as a stockbroker. And we were young and naive enough to think that, hey, let's do this. We can pull this off. We had to invent every aspect of the business. And we beat the streets for 6 months. Now, conversely, unlike the guy who couldn't make a phone call, I'm going door to door to dental offices with my cassette player and radio spots, trying to get dentists to join. I talked to 200 and something dentists before we found 20 who were willing to pay us because
Wow.
we didn't have any track record.
Yeah.
And so, but we had a little tiny phone room, 5 chairs in it. We answered the phones, but we got 50 phone calls the first day. And it was like, holy crap, what we're telling people might actually be true. This is going to work. So we just kept adding money to advertising, adding dentists to LA. And then we expanded. We went to San Diego. We went to Sacramento. We went to San Francisco. Then we went to New York and Chicago. We expanded and expanded and expanded. And it got way bigger than we imagined. We became the largest dentist referral service in the country. And I ran it for 27 years. We eventually sold it in decline, but it was unbelievably successful with all sorts of near extinction events along the way that you power through with your team that
Yeah.
just shows up every day and says, well, what do we do today?
I'm laughing, Fred, because to know that you were afraid of phones before, to then get rejected 180 times ish, 180 out of 20 when you started, that's a pretty big transformation.
Yeah.
So let's go
Well,
back to the
and
philosophical.
ironic that my whole career is based on a phone number.
What poetic justice that is.
Yeah.
So what happened in between, right? Because you said there was a couple years in between your first sales job and then this. Because there is a difference, I think, when you work for somebody else versus when you're an owner and a founder. I think that that's incredibly difficult to like role play your way into unless you're living it. Did it have something to do with the confidence transformation? It's like, well, I'm now this role.
What happened was working in advertising,
Mhm.
my boldness just accelerated because I was getting reinforcement for my creativity and my presentation skills. I was a junior copywriter and they would bring me into big meetings because I would present these TV spots I would act them out. I would just present them with so much energy just because I believed in them, because I wrote it. Whether it was great or not, had enough, let's call it self-worth instead of ego. And I was rewarded for it. Said because of it, it expanded into other stuff. Finally dating the women I wanted to date rather than the ones that were nice enough to start talking to me.
Right. So the transferable skill was your self-esteem.
Yes.
Once
Well,
you build
yeah,
the
because I
self-esteem, the
was
other stuff.
this is what I want your listeners to understand is that people think, well, I would be more bold if I were more confident. It's
Mm,
the other way around. It's bold action when you're not confident that builds your confidence. If you're confident, it doesn't require any boldness. But what happens is when you take bold action and are rewarded for it, which is way more often than you're going to think. And if you try and fail, you at least tried it and you feel better about yourself. Like you were saying, what stings is the regret of not trying and failing. After a while, it just doesn't feel as bad because you go like, hey, I took a big swing. Odds were against me. So I struck out, but I swung, and that changes you inside. and you
You s-
start chasing your dreams.
you said something, Fred, that it's just I've never thought of it before. It's how you feel about failure, because sometimes when you fail, you just like, okay, what did I learn from this? I can do my presentation this way, or I need to adjust this message or my tone or my how you failed, but you got something out of it. So it was positive. You learned and you got better versus sometimes people through analysis paralysis or the perfection event where they can't release it to the world as it's perfect. By whose standards, right? In advertising, I think that's the funniest thing because some of my best performing campaigns have been ones I thought were not going to do well. And some of my favorite ones did nothing.
Yes.
And I say this to say it's like how you feel about your wins or losses or your risks matters almost more than what actually happened, right? Because that same as we talked about with compound interest and self-esteem, I think is a real thing too. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah. It builds upon itself. And that really is, people say, what do you mean by super bold? I said, when you're never the one stopping yourself,
Mm,
because you know that trying and failing is going to feel better than not trying. So you try, you step up, you speak up, you go, I don't know how it's going to go. I'm not necessarily good at this yet, but this is how you get good at everything. At everything is we learn to walk by falling down. We learn to talk by speaking gibberish. It's like we weren't good at talking out of the womb or walking or any of those things, but we spend 12 years in education where F is bad, failure is bad.
mm,
Whereas what entrepreneurs and bold people and salespeople know is failure is just a stairway up.
mm.
That's all it is. If you don't learn anything from it, well, now you turned it into a failure. But if you mine it for information, now you're better. And if you reach where it's beyond you, like I'll use approaching an attractive woman at a party.
Sure.
If you say way out of my league, but I'm going to go say hi, and she ignores you after 2 minutes or looks away, that's what you expected to happen. But you at least walked up to her. But the other thing that happens is sometimes she talks to you and what happens is that confidence becomes magnetic. It turns into charisma because what you are is you are comfortable wherever you are. Even if you're not confident, you're somehow comfortable with how it's going to go. And that
Right.
draws people in.
I love the frame that if you can assess the pros and cons and you're okay with the worst case scenario, that to me is whether you want to call it boldness or confidence, whatever, it's at least not being stupid, right? Because I think I talk sometimes about the difference between stupidity and courage. And I think courage is assessing the risk, understanding it, and saddling up and going for it anyway. Whereas stupidity is risk blindness and just impulsively doing a thing without accounting for the
Preparation
consequence,
or
without
any
preparation.
or assessing the physical danger of
Right,
it,
right, right.
Yeah.
So then with that little definition split I offered, I want to ask you the differences between confidence and boldness because we alluded to it, but if you had to, define or really say what's the difference between confidence and boldness, I want to hear it right from the author's mouth.
So confidence is how you feel about yourself in certain situations. We all have situational confidence. We may be really comfortable one-on-one with people, but when we get in a group, we're not. We may be really comfortable talking about politics, but not about science, or about movies, but not about TV. Confident meeting potential dates, but in terms of really expressing our feelings, we're not confident at all. So there's all of the, we all have these, and it's unique to us and where we're confident and where we're not. But it's just how we feel about ourselves. And that changes the action where we're confident. Boldness is all about action. It is what you do, what you don't stop yourself from doing, taking risk, standing up for something, speaking up for something or someone, taking a risk, trying something new, saying, I'm going to change this about myself. It's action, action, action. Whereas confidence is how you feel about yourself. Now, what happens is the bolder you are, the more bold actions you take, the better you feel about yourself because you've expanded your confidence into a wider area.
I love the difference between one is a emotional state of being and the other is a sort of expressive action state. There's a quote that I love. Aristotle says, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is a habit, not a single moment in time, not a feeling." So I need to ask you, what then is super bold? We know what confident is, we know what boldness is. I don't know what super bold is. Well, how do you define that? Who is super bold?
Yeah. So most of the time, if you say what's holding you back in life, people will come up with all sorts of things. Oh, well, it's my teachers, it's my parents, it's my neighborhood, it's the economy, it's the government, it's my gender, it's my height, you
You
know.
name it.
But the reality is, what's stopping them from getting to their dreams and achieving them is them. It is the stories them telling themselves about, I don't want to, that's going to be embarrassing. I might fail at that. I'm not perfect enough at it. As you glanced at that idea of perfection
Right.
paralysis, but man, that's just another word for cowardice. Okay. Because you're
Oh,
waiting till you are flawless to act. It's not going to happen. So bold people go like, I'm ready to go. I'm going to see what happens. I feel like I might be good enough, or I'm going to figure it out along the way. I mean, with my business, with 800 dentists, we had to invent everything. So how did we do it? By doing it wrong, but creating the survivable mistakes so that we go like, this
right.
is what's going to work.
Right. Survivable mistakes. There's choices that are one-way doors where, exit only, you can't come back. And there's two-way doors where you go in, you see what's in the room, you come back and what's behind door number two. But being able to differentiate between the two, I think would probably help somebody to develop their confidence. It sure as heck would increase the likelihood they're going to take action and boldness where they know, okay, well, I can always come back. But what are your thoughts or experiences with identifying the difference between, hey, this decision we're trying to make and we want to say yes or no? How have you thought about temporary failures, or how have you been able to determine the difference between the two?
I think as long as you're alive, it's a temporary failure. If it didn't actually physically kill you, we can go back to what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, but hopefully it makes you smarter, uh, at whether you're stronger or not. But take business. We live in a country where if you fail in your business, you go bankrupt. I've been so broke that I didn't have money to put gas in my car to go look for a job. And yeah, I managed to claw my way out from that low, low, low point. And the reality is two things. I wasn't unhappy. I was just broke. And I found my way out. So I'm willing to take much bigger risks because I know I can find my way out. I mean, we had four real crisis points in my business. You run a business for 27 years. We went through, recessions and 9/11 and just things that changed in an instant and it changed the whole marketplace. Um, and we found a way through, but it was really tight. And in my personal life too, you could have a marriage that is a complete and utter, but you're still alive, which means there are still 7 billion other people in the world. Half of them are hopefully appealing to your gender. So
Yeah,
it's
if you
not
look at
over.
that mathematically, the odds
Yeah.
are in your favor.
Yeah. And that's the thing is we want to, we are drawn to the negative. The abundance mindset uh, is a deliberate effort to unwire this thinking of I have to be prepared for I have to under the worst thing that could happen. We're really good at figuring out what the worst thing is that could happen, but we're terrible at calculating the odds.
Yeah, that's it. Interesting. I think it kind of, my assumption, Fred, is it might go back to when we were cave people and it was like, should I leave the cave to go hunting or not? And it's like, oh, well, there's very real looming threat of being not winning the hunt and not coming back to the cave. But most decisions in corporate America are not like that. It's not life or death, but we still have that hardwired into our human anatomy.
Yeah. Because all we hear about are people's successes.
Mm,
And it's not publicized, but something like 90% of restaurants fail in the first 3 years.
that is true.
Yeah. So are you reading a lot about those? No, you should be, because that's where the information is. Success sometimes is a matter of timing and luck.
Mm,
At right place, right time, right
right.
market.
What if you never knew the person who had the phone number?
Yeah.
Would there have been a business? I don't know, but you
Yeah.
probably wouldn't have thought about it, at least at that time.
Or what if I ignored the fact that my career arc was ever increasing in risk and said, I'm going to play it safe. I got this advertising job. My pay keeps going. I'm going to stay here.
But I love how earlier you said that once I turn 50, then the risk goes through the roof. Like you said, people
Oh yeah. Yeah.
climb.
So that was the thing. But how often do we ignore, human beings have a terrible time thinking long term.
I totally agree. We're
And
so
so
much
if
in
I
the here and
ignored
now.
that that cliff that's impending that I'm driving straight towards, and there's nothing else except the cliff. There's no, if you don't own the agency, you're not a 70-year-old guy in the agency. Doesn't happen.
Amen. It also reminds me of the Titanic analogy, where if they only were aware of the iceberg, maybe 50 feet away, yeah, you're probably too late to make a decision to pivot and move. But
Yeah.
if you're aware of it 5 miles away, it's kind of easy to avoid. So
Yeah.
that's why this dilation of time, being able to look at your life as an entire arc and say, okay, from start to finish. Because my assumption is, if you would have waited, oh, we have this idea, let's think about it for 2 years, and then when we're really ready, then we'll start the company. Like, you just get closer and closer to the iceberg. It's harder to make decisions and pivot
Yeah.
the longer you wait.
And of course, there's plenty of people saying, "Oh, that's too risky. That'll never work. Nobody's done that before." And plenty of dentists told me to get out. They were not interested at all. I had dentists come up to me for the first 10 years of the business and tell me I was ruining the profession because
Really?
I was advertising. Many of those same dentists came up to me 20 years later and said, "You did more for this industry than anybody." Because I spent $500 million in television advertising over the course of the time I ran that business. The dentists would say, "I'm not a client of yours, but my patients come in more often because of your ads." And they said, you did more than the ADA ever did for me. But I had to endure the slings and arrows of them telling me, "You're ruining the profession." Because I said, actually, I'm not. Everybody benefits. My clients, me, my employees, and the patients who call me and find a dentist, because avoiding the dentist is not a healthy thing to do. And I'm helping them to not avoid the dentist.
I will never pretend to be a medical expert, but I would say you're almost like one of the doctors in the, say, 40s, 50s, 60s that said, hey, turns out smoking cigarettes can damage your lungs. And people be like, you're crazy. It's good for you. It fixes the humors or whatever they would say.
Yeah, it gives there's a Ronald Reagan ad where he's talking about how he smokes Chesterfields and now his digestion runs like a top. It
And
means he gets up, he lights a cigarette, and he takes a crap. It's like,
just
yeah,
because
they
people
thought it was,
agree or disagree with you, you had the conviction that you're like, I'm going to put 500 million on the table and we're going to see what comes out. And I think people just underestimate what risk entrepreneurs or business owners have to take, whether that's the social risk of hearing rejection or having naysayers, or the financial risk of, like you said, being at points in your life where you're too broke to put gas in your car, or putting 500 million on ads that people might not believe in. How do you overcome the risk or the outside influence? Because it sounds like you have a very strong locus of control within your own mind. And was
I
it
think one of the attributes of boldness becomes people, if you're determined to do something and believe enough in yourself and are willing to try it, knowing it may not go right, they can't discourage you. They can only motivate you. The guy who ran my ad agency When I told him I was quitting to run 800 dentists, he said, and I quote, "That'll never work." I imagine a few $100,000 million of advertising later that he saw, he might have started to think, geez, that could be working. But yeah, but I just went, oh, really? Watch me now.
Yeah, that I would have to assume Fred acted as fuel for you,
Yeah.
because some of my times as an employee, whether it's in ad agencies or brand side, I've heard, like, I don't remember much of the exact conversations, but anytime that I've worked for someone that said, you're too young and inexperienced, you can't do XYZ, or you know, you haven't made any real money in your life, and why would I listen to your advice, or other business owners listen to your advice, and things like that. I'm so glad I heard that at those younger years, because it was
Yeah.
rocket fuel for making me at least take action to try and prove them wrong. And they were right at the time.
Yeah. And many times they say it out of the goodness of their heart. They don't
Hmm.
want you to fail. They don't want you to lose. And I think there's way too many parents now that are so protective of their children that they don't have any resilience
Mm.
because they've been shock absorbed through everything. And, that's not going to benefit them as they go out into the world. Some of these young people, they need a service dog to brush their teeth. I mean, it's unfortunate because they're
It is.
impaired because
Yeah.
by doing stuff wrong. I love this, Sarah Blakely, who created Spanx. Her dad would sit her and her siblings down at dinner at every night and say, okay, tell me what you failed at today. What an amazing thing. Because he wanted to know if they were pushing themselves. And so they learned as like, I got to try something or dad's going to ask me and I'm going to have nothing. So
You know, I'm going to ask you a question first. I'll tell you a quick story. I grew up with a father who was entrepreneurial and sales, and just the most extroverted, exuding confidence type of guy that a kid like me could have asked for. And it used to make me really uncomfortable as a young kid, where he'd go up and just start talking to anyone, just making a joke, saying hi, how you doing? And I was
yeah,
like, do you know that person? He's like, no. I was like, well, aren't you afraid to get embarrassed? He just looked at me and started laughing. He goes, I don't care if they don't like me. And I'm like, you don't care if they don't like you? He's like, oh, we're having fun. If they're not having fun, like, well, at least I tried. And I didn't get it until I was older. And maybe I was just one of those teenagers. He's like, oh, dad's embarrassing. But I look back, I'm like, that's a great lesson. Do you remember what was like growing up for you? Did your parents instill any of these lessons that planted the seed that kind of grew today?
well, see, my dad was not very much like that. He was a very friendly guy, but he was a mail carrier. He was looking for the safest way through life. But my mom was bold, but she pushed me too hard too early, so I
Mm,
retreated. And what happens to introverts is we see bold people and we're embarrassed for them,
mm,
even though they're not embarrassed. It's like we've taken on the embarrassment that they refuse to. And it's just like, why the number one lesson you can learn as early in life as possible is exactly what your dad was talking about, which is stop worrying about what other people are thinking about you. Because most of the time they're not thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves. They go back to their favorite subject and they're having a judgment about you with nominal information. And
mm.
I honestly, I do it too. I look at people, I go like, oh, that guy should never wear that suit. It looks cheap on him or whatever. Or that woman should never have that hair color. It looks ridiculous. Or that guy's tattoo on his forehead is a dumb idea. Invariably, if I actually meet those person, them and I find out
Oh
I'm
yeah.
pretty much completely wrong about them. So if I'm wrong 98% of the time with my casual judgments of people, that's exactly what people are doing to me. So why worry about it? Why take it on?
I'll tell you a quick story. You said the forehead tattoo, and I have to laugh. I mentioned earlier to you that I'm very active in mixed martial arts, and I still look at myself as a casual, sort of an older guy who likes coaching more than anything to give back. And it's been a big part of my life. And I was coaching last year, and someone came in with a camera, and they were acting very as confident and bold as anyone going to a class. And I've never, it's my first time coaching the guy, and I got to know him, and he was very respectful and kind and this and that, but just the most charismatic, just out there person. And then a year later, he's got 110,000 followers on Instagram and he's traveling internationally for mixed martial arts. That happened in a year, and he ended up getting a forehead tattoo. Tattoo that was just, people thought that it was Sharpie, like they were just making fun of him. And he is doing break dancing in the cage. But is he the best fighter of all time? No. Is he an entertainer that people remember and he's remarkable for his charisma and personality? Yeah. And that turns out to open up more doors for him than if you're the most undefeated, perfect fighter of all time that no one has ever heard of. So my question for you, Fred, is when in your life have you met people that have been in A-list movies or have been world renowned, and how did those interactions go? We talked a bit off camera.
Yeah. So one of the things I talked about a little bit earlier is about, carpe diem, seize the day. Most of the time, real opportunities are a moment or two, where a split second, or you got a minute or two to decide, or like, do you want to do this? You want to come on this trip? You got to sign up by this afternoon, or you got to commit this. It's not, you don't have all day. It's so many times it's a yes or a no. It's a step up or freeze, speak up or be silent. Summon that everyday moment of bravery or stack another regret. And so I have I have learned, again, this is super bold people. One, we act like we belong wherever we are, which is a powerful, powerful thing, because people notice, wow, you're the only person in here without a suit and tie on, but you act like you belong here. And you're in Bermuda shorts. I went, yeah, it's like that thing, but also to have it be reflexive, to just respond in the positive, in the bold, have it that be your default response. And so I had a situation once. I was Sir Richard Branson, the guy who created Virgin Records and airline, and now Galactic and cruise lines and everything. He owns a couple of islands in the British Virgin Islands, and business people can rent the islands. So I was down there with a small group on one of the islands, and Richard lives on another island. Sometimes he comes over, sometimes he doesn't. So I playing tennis the first day I'm there, and I rupture my Achilles tendon.
No.
And it's like snap. And I talked to a surgeon, and he says, you might as well stay there and enjoy, and don't end the vacation. It's not going to heal. We'll fix it when you get back. So I'm just sitting there with my leg up. I can't even walk, watching people play tennis. And Richard comes over to me. I didn't know he was on the island. And he comes over to me. He says, well, this is such a bother that this has happened to you. Do you play chess? And I'm thinking, my God, I haven't played chess in 40 years. He's going to beat me in like 5 moves. He's going to think I'm an idiot, and he's going to say, I thought you could say play chess. Well, what did I do? I said, yeah, I play chess. And he waves somebody over with a chessboard, and we sit there and we play. And I'm playing such a disorienting game because I'm just remembering how to play, that I've left myself defenseless in a couple of ways. So he's on the full attack, and I'm paying attention. And at one point I say, that's check. Actually, it's checkmate. Cause he was dropping all his defenses to just come at me. And he looks down at the board and he goes, oh, you, and he calls me a bad name and immediately sets the board up again to play. And meanwhile, we're having this fun conversation because he's a very playful person, very competitive person, but also interested in all sorts of stuff. And I know not to interview him, not to ask for business advice or investments or anything like that. I'm talking to him like a normal person.
Mm-hmm.
Spends the rest of the week, he keeps coming to find me to play chess and to sit across from him at the dinner table with like 30 people. And he's like, sit there, to keep other people off him. So all because I didn't say, no, I don't play chess. What a regret that would have been had I just said, I don't really play. And go, oh, okay, well, hope you get better. That would have been it.
And the other thing is, I've met people that have ruptured their Achilles before. I can't say to any of them that, aren't you glad you ruptured your Achilles? Temporary pain for a long-term awesome story, because I'm sure your Achilles is fine now.
Yeah. It took a while. It was a rough injury, but then, you know, I've run into Richard a couple more times since. And, you know, and I said, the second time I ran into him, like in a whole different place, I said, I look forward to playing chess again. And he says, how about right now? Somebody's got to
Well,
have a chessboard,
well,
right? He wanted to beat me again because
one of the
he berated me constantly about how slowly I move. Now I'm like my brain is on fire trying to solve this game.
but when you want an archetype or an example of someone who exemplifies boldness, you play chess with someone that's a great example,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I mean, he's stacked the bold moves through his whole life
Right.
while being uncomfortable. He says, like, he would describe himself as an introvert, except he'll ride a tank through Times Square to launch Virgin record store, you know, and bungee jump off the Palm Hotel, you know. So he's adventurous, but he learned to do things. I mean, with just his life is fascinating. And this is the thing. He is the business person I admire most in the world. Imagine if I blew the opportunity to
Right.
have a in-depth interaction with the person I admire most in the world. And
Wow.
so I get to do that with him just by not stopping myself.
I love that frame. It's like people, they have dreams like, oh, their celebrity crush, or, oh, I'd love to meet this person. It's, whatever that the person may be. It's like, but if you get the opportunity to meet that person, you better seize it, right? Because just meeting that person is not enough. It's like, how do you behave in the moment? And I don't know. I love that frame. I would also have to ask. We mentioned Carpe Diem a few times. We've shared that a favorite movie of ours would be Dead Poet Society. You also met Robin Williams.
Yes.
How did that interaction go, and what are some of the things you took away from that? I would love to hear that story as well.
So a friend of mine invited me up to go on a ski vacation up in Lake Tahoe. And she said, going to be a whole bunch of people there and Robin Williams might be there. And I said, well, let's go. Let's go anyway, but let's go. So we went and it actually rained half the time. So we spent a lot of time in the condo. And there was about 12 of us there. But I was with him for 2 days. We actually played charades. So I've played charades with Robin Williams on the opposing team. And he was incredibly frustrated because had his son there. His son was like 11 or 12, and he couldn't get his son to understand him. And it was so fascinating to watch him. Like, you know, Robin Williams, you can imagine, like probably the best charades player
Well, I would assume if
on the
there's an Olympics
planet.
for charades, he's a first team all star.
Yes, yeah, Olympic level capabilities. And it was, you know, and it was so much fun. And he was joking all the time. Here's the thing. He's in two of my favorite movies of all time, Dead Poets Society, which I consider the perfect movie, and Good Will Hunting. I didn't tell him I had the whole weekend. Talk about Carpe Diem. I had Carpe 3 Diem. And I didn't tell him. And then he died 2 years later, killed himself 2 years later. And this carry this as one of my greatest regrets because I didn't have the bravery in that moment to just say, Robin, you know, these are my two favorite movies. I just want to thank you for them. I just thought I had all the time all weekend. And then, you know, like he left a little bit early and I missed it. It was like the window of opportunity is wide open for 2.5 days and I wait. So that was probably the last time I didn't speak up in my life because it hurt way too much. It hurts right now to talk about it.
There's a difference between confidence and boldness, and Robin was, I think, one of the all-time greats in his field, and universally, I think many would agree with both of us. But for someone to pass the way he did, it's like I want anyone listening to know that even the best people in the world, what they do, they are dealing with stuff that we don't know at all, right? Like, so it's awesome to admire someone's work, but just keep in mind that, like, you never know what someone's going through. I wanted to share that. The next question I have for you to change topics a little bit is you've expressed times where you've seized the moment and you've said what you want to say, and times where you were in the moment, you didn't say the things you wanted to say, but you've also expressed that you're an introvert, and typically introverts make the best writers. Now you're an author. For those that are listening, they can't see, behind us is Super Bold, from under confident to charismatic in 90 days. Can you tell me about that journey from business, advertising to authorship, and what was the frame of why you made that choice, and what are some of the things that you're learned along the way?
Writing was something I think if you asked 8-year-old Fred what he wanted to do, he would say he wanted to be a writer. Now it would have been, I'm reading Pinocchio and things like that, but and then Hardy Boy books and all that.
Yeah.
So I loved reading and I was fascinated with stories and things, but I couldn't figure out how to make money. I studied creative writing in college. But when I got to advertising, I said, I can make money writing. There was actually a night school in LA that taught creative advertising writing. And I took it for 6 months. It was taught by creative directors who were working creative directors. So it wasn't like those who can't do teach
Right.
people. It was like those who are really
Are
great at
currently
it are
doing.
teaching you. Yes.
Yeah.
And they taught me how to write advertising. And that expanded into just effective communication that as I would write, and then I wrote 2 books for the dental industry on marketing, and I started to get on stage because I had all of this content, and I learned, and I was bold enough to prepare it. Now I studied improv comedy for several years, which is actually the principles of how improv comedy is taught is how Super Bold works, how the book works and teaches people how to build their boldness. It's exactly those same principles,
Yes,
building,
and
building gradually and saying yes and starting. I mean, people say, well, how does somebody walk on stage and create a scene with a suggestion? Like by not starting that way. That's how improv comedy starts non-verbally. It's just like martial arts. You don't like, you know what you do? Go into the ring with a master and see if you can beat him.
it's just
No.
like martial arts.
Yeah.
It's
Is
just
you
like that.
start with the simplest, with a simple learning a strike, learning to control your balance, your stance, and your presence. And so that evolution of confidence, it's turned
Well,
into stage presence and writing, but being an introvert, I knew how to be effective alone. So the difference between me as young introverted Fred and me now is I'm alone because I want to be when I want to be. I may be alone for 4 days straight, not talk to anybody, just work, but it's by choice. And if
Mhm.
I want to meet somebody new or talk to somebody I know or like, or go out and have fun, I do it. But I also have the ability to be alone and really comfortable being alone rather than going, I'm lonely. It's a
There's a
big,
difference between being
big
lonely
difference.
and being alone.
Yep. 180 degrees apart.
So, Fred, I've never thought about how true this is, but someone that took acting as an extracurricular in college was the most important class I've ever taken because get over stage fright and you get over a lot of things that are important for interpersonal communication. And like you mentioned, many of my friends that made a career out of acting were the serious introverts off stage. But what similarities or correlations between improv comedy and running a business? Because now talking to you, I'm sort of making that connection where it's like, well, you deal with it as it comes and you figure it out on the fly. Do you think that there's a strong correlation between the two?
I think there's several of them, but I think one of the things that people need to develop in the age of AI is you need to be really good on your feet in front of people because AI is going to do all the other stuff.
Yeah.
All the interpersonal human stuff, you're going to have to be even better at it. And that's what this developed in me is just being able to connect with an audience, whether it's 12 people in a boardroom. And then at the same time, in running a business, okay, I have to trust my creativity. I have to take survivable risks here, or we're going to stagnate. I have to be comfortable giving somebody feedback rather than just keeping them forever and hoping they get better, which never happens. I got to be comfortable firing people. I got to be comfortable saying we invested in this software, this technology, and man, it's just not working, even though we got 400 grand in it and we've, 1,000 hours in it. It takes boldness to say, I lost. I'm wrong. This
It totally does.
it comes in everywhere in terms of like we have to solve this problem. How can we solve it? what am I doing wrong? We did a 360 on me at one point with my team, which is you have to be willing to do a 360 means you're getting negative feedback about yourself. You're getting critique. I shot the messenger. And when I found out, I had no idea. And my brother, was my COO, just looked at me and goes, seriously, you don't know this about yourself? And then I started to notice myself doing it and I stopped. But it was like, I was bold enough to say, tell me where I'm off course. Tell me where
You're bold enough to be vulnerable. You're bold enough.
I'm trying to be better.
Right.
I hate feedback. I hate critique. So does everybody else, but I need it.
Right.
It's the only way to get better. Eventually you can't, I can't make myself a better speaker, but other speaking coaches in 5 minutes, they watch me on stage and go like, you do this and have you tried this instead and stuff. It's like, really? And I get better. But if I want to go, no, I'm good enough. I don't want any critique. That makes me feel bad.
Yeah, I never thought about the correlation between boldness and vulnerability, but you don't really get one without the other, I think.
No.
Because I think in order to be bold, you can't shut yourself off from the outside world and feedback. And in order to be vulnerable, that's taking a risk, right? There's always the consequence, you get your feelings hurt. And on the other side of that, you had mentioned before about, the difference between confidence and boldness. I think that you don't really get confidence without risk. You don't get confidence without seeing what's on the other side of risk. But just like with boldness, it's there's always a potential downside. So someone tries to tell you an investment with 100% certainty, they're probably a scam artist.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah, I mean, that's what a con artist is they make you trust them even though they're not trustworthy because they know what triggers human nature to trust. So I'm using my boldness and confidence for good to help people have better lives and chase their dreams. But hey, it takes boldness to be a cat burglar too. It's just not a great path because you haven't calculated the downside risk well enough.
amen. Now, I want to ask you, we're getting to my favorite part of the show, and it's leave a question, ask a question. I'll start with the question that was left for you without knowing my guest, not knowing who you were, which was, and I can't wait for this one. Who would you have as your mentor if you could have anyone dead or living?
Muhammad Ali, because he was bold enough. First of all, he invented smack talk,
Oh yeah.
and took it to a height that almost nobody has reached since, which is unusual for the creator or something. Because Jimi Hendrix was an incredible guitarist, but there were guys that just used him as inspiration who are better than Jimi Hendrix. Muhammad Ali, he was bold enough to give up his boxing title because he wasn't going to fight in the Vietnam War.
In his prime, at the top of his career.
And it ended his prime because of it. So his values superseded fame, of which he was at the epitome. He was at the top. He was literally the world champ. I mean, there's a lot of things we can be good at. It's hard to be the world champ at anything. He was. And he was a man who spoke out and said things, that helped people understand what it was like to even be Black as him.
He was one of the most influential figures in American history.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes of his is impossible is an opinion. And imagine living your life that way instead of like, never, utter impossible without the word yet right after it, because that's the world we live in. Yeah. Everything's going to be possible someday
on a long enough timeline.
Yeah. So don't get, then it's, even coming down to starting 800 dentists, that'll never work. That business is not possible.
Not yet.
Or maybe it isn't yet, but we had so many imitators after a while, it was becoming laughable. Because most people, their idea of a business is me too. I'll do the same thing as you. I'll create another yogurt stand. And instead of me different, me better. So because me better takes boldness. Me too is playing it safe. And that's actually
still following.
Much riskier.
What question do you have for my next guest without knowing who they are?
I would ask them, what person do you need to apologize to that is still alive. That if all you did was call them up or go see them or write to them, you could get that apology handled and not carry that regret around with you. That's a very personal thing, obviously, but I mean, it takes boldness to apologize.
Yeah, I think sometimes admitting fault is one of the most courageous things that you can do. And you don't have forever, right?
No, no, I have had people die on me that I say, yep, never going to fix that.
Yeah. Fred, we are approaching time. It has been an absolute pleasure. I'm glad to have made your acquaintance and get these stories out into the world. It's been awesome. The last question is not super deep. It's where can people get your book? How can they get in touch with you, learn more, connect?
So the book is on Amazon. Super bold, from underconfident to charismatic, 90 days. It's in hardcover, Kindle, and Audible, and it's me reading it. So you'll get to hear me inflecting everything the way I like to. And it is full of exercises, boldness exercises that you can do to build your boldness muscle. You can take a boldness quiz to see where you are, what your boldness quotient is. Go to my website, fredjoyal.com, Joyal. And I'm Fred Joyal everything: Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and my website. So I have a really good newsletter, but take the quiz. I think you'll find it very interesting, the insights of where you are in your boldness.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Fred, and thank you everyone listening. As always, I don't have any advertisements for you. My only ask is to go out and be bold. Do something that you didn't think you could do and try it anyway. Till next time, thanks.